Are we not diving into one of the biggest cultural moments of 2024 with this P. Diddy legal debacle?
I'm not casting aspersions about anyone else, but there are a significant degree of rich and powerful individuals who, by allegation, were either victimized at these events or alternatively were involved.
You mentioned seeing footage of him beating up his girlfriend. We've seen all these things about him, but we see celebrity cases all the time. So, and this is a super high profile one. We know that. But why is this one grabbing so much attention in the media?
And you will get a lot of people who, just for nuisance value, want to get paid off to go away, even if it's true or not, you know?
Yeah.
Because he's going to be buried. And I don't mean going down necessarily. I just mean everyone's going to be coming at him from all sides.
Oh, sure.
So if there's someone in influence or power here, based upon how current history trends, names aren't going to come out.
Have you experienced biased judgments on behalf of like, oh, that's probably because that person was pretty powerful?
The unique thing about this case is there is such a volume of adversaries behind it. So you're not dealing with a lone wolf coming out and saying, you know, you did this. You have a small army of people complaining against you.
So it's funny you bring that up because there's some super interesting allegations right now. Now, you'll have to clear this up for the audience too, because we have conspiratorial allegations. We have people who just put a screen up behind them and say like, look at this, look at this. But again, we don't really know if we can trust these people because conspiracies are novelties, right? It's new, it's novel, it's different. People are super, super attracted to them. And so I'm super excited about this conversation, Gavin, because we're going to be able to say, hey, what's actually happening within these legal allegations with Sean P. Diddy? Yeah. What's actually happening? What are on the documents? What is he actually being potentially convicted of? Because as you can see behind me, more than a dozen lawsuits. Okay.
Oh, yeah. There was an update to that where it was like something like 1,200 lawsuits are going to be filed. Ew. Like, you know how they have those mass tort ads that they throw out all across the country? If you took this vitamin or you had this mesh or something like that, there's basically attorneys out there now doing that with Puffy. Like that. And that's anyway, but that's sort of what happens once. Yeah. Once attorneys smell blood, like, you know, that they start circling around, you know? Yeah. So, and that, you know, the point you raised about we don't know what's true and what's not. And you will get a lot of people who just for nuisance value want to get paid off to go away, even if it's true or not, you know?
Yeah.
Because he's going to be buried. Like, and I don't mean going down necessarily. I just mean everyone's going to be coming at him from all sides.
Oh, sure.
And it's almost dangerous to your own well-being to be like, well, maybe we should think about this a second. You know, everyone's going to be like, no, he's a monster. Fuck thinking about it. It's like, okay, never mind. Yeah. So it's going to be bad for him.
There's so many people involved in this, man. So, okay, let's start here. Are we not diving into one of the biggest cultural moments of 2024 with this P. Diddy legal debacle?
Oh, without question.
It's wild.
It started picking up steam slowly over time. There were the allegations of the fires and things like that at recording studios. There was these non-compete agreements, which I actually had the privilege of commenting on an article for the Miami Herald for. And then it picked up more and more speed. It seems that the turning point, at least from a public perception perspective, was when that video of him manhandling a woman in a hotel floor came out. And that basically, like Maximus said in Gladiator, unleashed hell.
Yeah.
Yes. And since that point in time, it's been, you know, the criminal indictment came down. It's about a 12-page document. RICO and acts of prostitution, coercion, and then you have attorneys out there who are saying they're looking to bring over 1,200 lawsuits against him for various acts of misconduct. So even outside of the news and the papers, I mean, every third meme is a Puffy and baby lotion meme. You know, you can't escape it, or saying Diddy 3 times in the mirror and he appears behind you. Like, there's
so true. So, well,
it really is a significant cultural moment. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, okay. So here's the thing, though. You mentioned seeing footage of him beating up his girlfriend. We've seen all these things about him, but we see celebrity cases all the time. So, and this is a super high profile one. We know that. But why is this one grabbing so much attention in the media? Is it simply the fame, or is there something more? Is there something deeper?
I think the deeper aspect of it is it has elements of Epstein, because this is not just about P. Diddy. And I'm not casting aspersions about, or, Mr. Combs. I'm not casting aspersions about anyone else, but there are a significant degree of rich and powerful individuals who, by allegation, were either victimized at these events or alternatively were involved. So it's more than one man. He is the one facing the brunt of the allegations and the heat right now, but it's more than one man. It's almost a reflection on the depravity of the rich and famous.
Mm.
So you have a normal guy, perhaps I consider myself one, or whoever, just some guy living a normal life, trying to do the right things, goes to church, has a family, and then you have these rich and famous entertainers. And it's, in this context, by the way, I don't want to slam the industry. There are great people in the industry, but doing whatever they want to a degree that Sodom and Gomorrah couldn't even imagine.
Mm.
So it's, it's titillating. It's a commentary on not only the wealthy, but those in power, and how those in power live by completely different rules by all the rest of us. And absent him, getting caught, or let's just say facing allegations, this stuff might go on forever. And as we know with Epstein, like, this went on for a long time. And in Epstein, he actually got charged in West Palm Beach with something and just sort of went under the table. So the conspiracy theory element starts working its way into that. And that's what really hooks people.
Yes.
When they can just basically start making up whatever they want to about why things are.
Yes.
Then everyone all of a sudden becomes a talking head,
Yes.
The conspiracy theory thing wraps it all up and makes it bigger.
It does. And so what's interesting about what you're saying is, well, is there a chance that he could just be the fall man, if you will? And there's a lot more happening within this ring of these sex scandals and sex trafficking and all this different stuff. Is there a chance that Diddy could be taking the fall as a distraction, or what are you seeing in the legal space that would give you any reason to believe that he is the fall man?
Well, I would start by referencing the indictment that was entered against him, and the charge is RICO, which is basically criminal conspiracy. You can't conspire with yourself. Conspiracy requires more than one person. It requires an enterprise, actually, both in a civil context and in the criminal context. So it could be that he was the top of the conspiracy. These RICO laws were brought about to bring down the mafia effectively, because you could never prove that the higher ups in the mafia actually had anything to do under the current laws in the various acts that the mafia undertook. But RICO allowed them to lump everyone's conduct together and attach it to each person involved in the conduct. So, for a fact, there's more people involved.
Yeah.
By virtue of, let me clarify that. By virtue of the allegations in the indictment, there's more people involved. The question is he the top of that pyramid, or is he somewhere else in there? And it is. Listen, I mean, Diddy's very successful, very wealthy. I remember, I used to love his music when I was in law school, even going out with friends in Miami. I actually saw him out in didn't talk to him or interact, just saw him out in the living room club in Miami one time. Just normal, nothing strange. But I imagine he's not the wealthiest or most powerful guy that was at one of those parties. So then you start the question, we don't have enough information to know if he's the top of the pyramid, mm-hmm. if there is even a pyramid, but there's certainly the possibility that there is someone else sitting atop that pyramid. I mean, I know I'm going to get conspiratorial when I say this. We still don't have the bloody Epstein client list.
I know.
Like, I don't understand how at this point in time, the guy's dead and hung himself. Ghislaine Maxwell's in jail, mm-hmm. and we still don't have the client list.
Yeah.
Like, I can understand protecting newspaper sources, not protecting guys who are going to islands, or maybe women too, I don't know, to like do things with children. So if there's someone in influence or power here, based upon how current history trends, names aren't going to come out,
Hmm.
and they will. Like Jeffrey Epstein hung himself. Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail being quiet, and that list has gone nowhere.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you could imagine a scenario where Diddy takes the fall, and there's no more details released about the people who were involved in the events, So
Yeah.
it's easier to bury one person than 100.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. So you're closer to this situation than I think most because you were featured in a Miami Herald article and you were interviewed about the non disclosure agreements that were in this case. And you
Yes.
mentioned, and I quote, the non disclosure agreements are terrifying. Unpack that a little bit.
Well, the clear intent of the agreement was to intimidate. And there was actually, and this was predicated upon New York law, and there was actually, and in being terrifying, let me back up a little bit. In being terrifying, it threw everything in, including the kitchen sink. Well, the problem with that is that, at least under New York law and under Florida, you can't throw the kitchen sink in. There's certain things that if you throw it into the agreement, it negates the agreement. So, and I can't remember the specific site, but it was one of Trump's companies was the party to the litigation where they had a non-compete agreement, and using language narrower than Diddy's agreement, the New York court found it to be unenforceable. So, as an attorney, first of all, you'd want to advise your client to actually have an agreement that's enforceable on unless you have a talk with him and saying, we're dealing with knuckleheads, it doesn't matter. Let's just make it as terrifying as possible. I
Sure.
don't think you should ever really give that advice, but perhaps that was a line of thought in drafting it as broadly and as expansively as they did.
Hmm.
But no, ultimately, I believe it would be held to be unenforceable under New York law because of precedent that has less restrictive non-disclosure agreements being unenforceable. But
Hmm.
you have, some kid, some 19, 20-year-old kid walks in there, sees the empire that is Diddy, and then sees this legal document that basically makes it sound like it's going to follow you to the grave.
Jeez.
That's intimidation. It's not illegal intimidation, by the way. There's nothing untowards in the conduct in the perspective of sanctionable conduct, but it had a very specific intent.
Yeah.
And I know it could have been handled. A lot of things could have been handled better to mitigate risk, I believe.
Yeah. Well, so, and we definitely want to get to that. We want to understand from your legal expertise why this is in the public eye. And based on our prior conversations, you feel like it probably could have been kept more behind closed doors and handled better on the legal side for him. But when it comes to the NDAs, these non disclosure agreements, is this something where, as a celebrity or a high profile human being, you have these NDAs that people sign for various things? Or was this specific to, hey, here's a whiteout party? Hey, here's this. Hey, here's that. Who was supposed to sign this and why were these created?
These were blanket NDAs,
Okay.
and you raise a very good point on the issue of specificity. These were not tailored to any particular fact or circumstances. They were tailored to address any event under the sun.
Okay.
Period. And that perhaps is where there could have been some work done to give a better result. I was just very brief aside. My dad used to have a chemical plant, and he had a warehouse in Fort Lauderdale, and it was next to this place called Trapeze.
Mhm.
Trapeze is a swingers club. I've never been there. Never intend to go there. But I was scanning over their website in the last few days to see like if they had policies or procedures or things like that, or if they had an NDA contained within their terms and conditions. What I did see in there is they did have rules, and so everything has to be by consent. For example, that was one of the rules they left. This is a club where adults have sex. So everything was laid out in a very straightforward manner. Now, if for example for these parties, if he would have said, this is an adult event, people will be having sex at these events. If consent is required, you must obtain consent before. If you could have laid this out, and now don't get me wrong, I understand it may be a complete horse,
Mhm.
but you come into a court with a he said, she said scenario. You have a whole bunch of people saying, yeah, no, we knew it was a sex party, and like no one was forced to do anything they didn't want to. And you have this document saying this is what this is. And then after that, it really weakens the case of anyone who tries to come after you. That this is by no means to excuse improper behavior
Mhm.
or to support it, but what it is to do is to structure your agreements in such a way that proper consensual adult behavior can take place. And when once again you have these everything and the kitchen sink NDA agreements, that only attempts to control through fear. It doesn't try to do anything through reason.
Got it.
And a little bit of reason injected into that could have taken care of that.
Got it. Now, I'm going to assume that a business owner who listens to this, because I know you work with a lot of high profile people and celebrities. And so I'll assume someone listening to this does not have ill intent for putting an NDA together. So we're not sitting
Yes.
here saying like, hey, if you have some really awful, sinister plans, like let us help you not let things blow up in the public eye. We're not doing that at
Yeah.
all. But what we are doing is, because this non-disclosure agreement is so central to the case, let's talk about a very practical use of NDA for a high profile, in the public eye individual that you would work with, and how you'd want to structure it and why they would even have these in the first place.
Well, the NDA agreements in the context of entertainers are extremely commonplace. You have what is it, TMZ out there and other news. That's unfair to them. The entertainment news sources that their entire programming is predicated upon the life of celebrities. There's an economic value to a celebrity's brand, and they have every right to attempt to protect that as well, by virtue of a properly crafted NDA agreement. Now, when someone enters into your home, for example, for a party, if I'm inviting you into my house for a party, I'm not expecting you to go to TM. They wouldn't listen, but if I were a celebrity, go to TMZ and say, "Hey, look what I found at Gavin's house." I mean, that's
Right.
honestly that's incredibly abusive. That's you're abusing someone's trust when you come into someone's house consensually. You're a guest. There is a certain obligation. So every time you're in someone's house and these agreements stand up, you can have these non-disclosure agreements that say basically anything you saw that took place here, you don't talk about. The NDA agreement that was drafted in Diddy's case said anything, anywhere, at any time, even indirectly related to us, you can include, you can discuss. So it really jumped off the edge as to in the context of overbroadness. But if a celebrity, you can't talk about me. Now you have guests in your house. And you say, what happens in my house with my guests? Like courts are going to uphold things like that. Those are reasonable. You're inviting someone into your house. You have a reasonable expectation as to how they should, conduct themselves regarding your privacy in the house. Anywhere, anytime, anyone, no matter how ancillarily related, that's too much. Honestly, you look at that and you can't even tell who's covered by it, what's covered by it. When you start having to guess at what sort of things you can and cannot do, that's what really goes to the core of invalidating an agreement. Because there's this concept called meeting of the minds, which is super fundamental. But it's just this idea that if you and I enter into agreement, our minds have to be of the same nature as to what we're agreeing to. But when you have something that just is so overbroad that you're not really sure what even you're agreeing to, then you don't have an agreement of that nature. Then you don't have an agreement at all. So
Gotcha.
by saying when you're in my house, whatever you see in my house, completely confidential. And obviously there's more language to it than that, but the scope of it is limited to that, then you're fine. And candidly, I'm not sure if he used this NDA in every single circumstance, but when someone comes into the recording studio, they should have signed one there. When someone came into his house, they should have signed one there. If someone was entering into a deal with him, they should have signed one for that. For every different event and location of his life, he should have had an agreement of this nature. But instead, there appears to have been just this boilerplate one that fails.
So it sounds
him.
like the biggest mistake that his legal team made was way too broad of an NDA that now the courts
Yes,
look at and they're like, dude, there's nothing specific here. And so this is basically null and void.
correct.
Okay.
Now, that I don't know that determination has been made, but
Okay.
based upon the Trump case out of New York, which had less restrictive language, that decision would likely be made.
Got it. Okay. So now let's talk about NDA. So the law is put together and the foundation of the law is moral, right? We're trying to protect people. So let's talk about, let's say he would have put a specific NDA together for these whiteout parties and all of this crazy stuff that he was doing. At what point does an NDA become null and void no matter how specific it is? In other words, can people agree to break the law and do really funky things and it hold
No,
up in court?
no.
Okay.
You there's actually this video I saw recently. It was hilarious. It involved a woman who called the cops because she gave money to a drug dealer
I think I
and the
saw.
drug dealer didn't give her money and didn't give her the drugs, sorry. And she said, I want my drugs. And for like a good 5 minutes, the cop's sitting there just trying to explain to her how what she's asking is wrong. And
That's
it's not sinking in at all. So no, you can't at least under US law, you can't attempt to attorney-client privilege is a different issue, but if someone commits a murder and a cop brings you in and asks you questions about the murder, sure, you may have a Fifth Amendment right not to say anything, but you can't say, I have an NDA, I can't discuss anything. No. And in fact, what you in confidentiality agreements and in NDAs and in settlement agreements, you frequently see language under there that under court process that you can convey the information. So if something illegal was going on, the NDA is not going to hold up. But that, you know what, that actually that becomes an interesting question though, because I mean, obviously, for example, there's allegations that people were forced to engage in non-consensual sex. Okay, so obviously the people who were engaged in that believe that there was some sort of criminal activity undertaken. But if you're just some random dude walking around a party, seeing people do drugs and have sex,
Sure.
like, are you at that point thinking, oh, there's a crime going on? I mean, it's Miami for Pete's sake. Like,
Right.
I mean, doing drugs is illegal. Don't get me wrong, but like,
Right.
it's like you're gonna be like, whatever, you know. I mean, if you had that, and it becomes complicated because then you somewhat become like someone getting shot in the head is pretty straightforward, you know.
Right.
But someone having allegedly non-consensual sex, that's a much more difficult thing to determine in most circumstances. There are
Sure.
obviously there's somewhere it would be apparent.
Sure. So there's a lot of stories floating around. I even heard just this morning, my wife's real big into this. She like knows way more than me. She was really excited that I was doing this episode. She's like, "Oh, make sure you ask this." I don't know the details, but what I do know is that some people are coming out and saying things like the baby oil actually was, I think she said, BHB or BHP, one of the ecstasy types of drugs that would be, the victims would be lathered in it so they could not remember what happened. And I was like, that
Like it,
sounds ridiculous, but I don't know. Right. So, what I'd like to ask you is from a legal perspective, you have access to what the exact allegations are in this case. So, can you clear that up for the public?
and I will be very. I do want to be specific on my framework of knowledge. I have read the indictment. Indictments they contain the amount of facts necessary to survive dismissal, which is minimal. So there are allegations that there was a lot. It's sort of funny that they're really fixated on the baby oil, to be honest. I mean,
I know.
okay, a lot
I
of baby
know.
oil. But in multiple sections, they make reference to it. But they do make reference to people being drugged. They do make reference to the baby oil, non-consensual activity, male prostitutes, which honestly wasn't something I was expecting when I mean, I maybe, I don't know. I just, you don't normally think of like rap stars hiring male prostitutes, to be
Right.
honest. So yeah, that as far as like the evidence, I haven't done a deep dive into the evidence yet.
Yeah.
As far as the possibility of a topical drug, yeah, super possible. Well, I
Okay.
mean, whether it's true or not, who knows? But I mean, back in the day, acid, if you dropped acid on your skin, you would trip. If you can do testosterone on your skin as well, all sorts of, yeah, there's many topical application can apply to many drugs.
Yeah. If it was
I
concealed in
mean,
baby oil, though, that would be an issue.
correct. That would be, I guess if they tested the bottles and I mean, the real simple answer to that is if they test the bottles and they find it's there, it's there.
Right.
You know, it would seem, I don't know. I guess that is pretty easy if people are getting crazy. I mean, it would seem easier just to be like, here's drugs, thank you. Because no one's really saying no at these parties, I imagine. But, or drop, or doing something improper. But like, yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. A topical, like roofie, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be crazy. I mean, I know, and you mentioned this to me before, which was sort of interesting, but this idea that like basically it's sort of hard to run away when you keep slipping. Like,
Yeah.
so like they're all oiled up head to toe, the floors are all oiled up head to toe. You're like, I want to go, and poof, and you
Yeah.
just go right down.
Yeah.
And you can barely stand up,
Yeah.
Like I mean, wonder if you could like figure skate your way out of there somewhere or something like that. But like,
Jeez.
I just, yeah, I mean, who knows? That could be part of it a lot. It is. And the funny thing that came out about that is I think his attorney made reference to Costco or something like that. And Costco came out and this is my recollection anyway. Costco came out and said, yeah, we don't sell baby oil in bulk. So
Oh,
like,
snap.
no. Yeah.
Oh, dang. Oh, maybe he's really good friends with the Johnson and Johnson CEO or something, and he just didn't want to put him in hot water. Oh my goodness. Okay, so did you see any mention of children, of minors?
In the indictments, no. There was some reference to in a news story I saw today. Actually, there was some reference to minors, but honestly, I didn't. I didn't. Yeah, see, this one lawyer's already gotten a P. Diddy lawsuit. Reach out to us. Yeah, 1 hour ago, Diddy allegedly told minor to drop his pants so that he could inspect it as a rite of passage. P. Diddy faces, 18 hours ago, P. Diddy faces wave of new civil suits alleging sexual assault by 6 victims, including 1 minor.
Okay, so people are putting up all these videos. People are saying, oh, this happened, that happened, the baby oil's laced, all this different stuff. What reference point should we be like, yeah, but did you get it from here? In other words, is all the information coming from one spot that we should be like, hey, I just saw this article an hour ago. It was an attorney. So should I trust him? How do I know I can trust this information?
You really can't trust any of it, to be honest.
So is it only what's in the
It's not
indictment papers?
the I wouldn't take them as true, but there has to be a factual and evidentiary basis in support of the indictment. So those allegations are predicated upon some photo, some testimony, something somewhere that allows that to stand. So if you read over the indictment, yes, we have the presumption of innocence here. So as much as everyone, I mean, the court of public opinion in this country, you're hung from day one. Mm-hmm. But like in the legal system, we do have the presumption of innocence, which is sacred. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's innocent until proven guilty.
Sure.
That's not me saying he did or didn't do it. And that's not, honestly, I don't even draw a conclusion on that. I really do believe that much in the presumption of innocence in this country.
Okay.
So despite all the things that are being said, but I don't know what, oftentimes, especially involving sexual crimes, the criminal files will be sealed. I mean, certainly if this goes to trial, that'll be a good time to find out what is and is not true. A phenomenon that already, in my opinion, has arisen that's going to carry on is you're going to have, Diddy's a very wealthy man and there's blood in the water and there may be a lot of people with legitimate grievances, but there may also be people without legitimate grievances who just jump on to try to get a nuisance payout or something like that. Maybe there's none of those, but there is certainly the possibility that blood being in the water, the sharks start circling.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough.
So when I see an article like this, more than a dozen lawsuits target Sean Diddy Combs as he sits in jail. If I see another one tomorrow that says we're up to 30 more that just came out, how does that happen? Like, what is it? Oh, another victim comes forward and then you file a suit and then the internet knows about it. I mean, I don't understand what what the proper system is for this information to get in front of me for me to know, like, oh, what does that mean?
Well, before this blew up, there were very limited civil lawsuits. Once something like this blows up as it has, the attorneys who, want to represent people who have been victims or who are victims of a civil or criminal wrong, obviously they'd only represent them in a civil context, advertise the hell out of this situation and say, have you been hurt? I'm paraphrasing. Have you been hurt by Diddy? And they will blast this everywhere they possibly can. And more people start showing up saying, yes, I was. So it's not, you're not really dealing now with the phenomenon of people coming forward. You're dealing with the phenomenon, in my opinion, of people being pulled out.
People being pulled out. What do you mean by that?
Pulled out. Well, when you're coming forward, you're saying, please, someone help me. He did this to me.
Right.
When you're being pulled out, someone's, hey, did he hurt you? Well, you know what? You need an attorney and you need to protect your rights, which, by the way, they do. But it's coming forward is of your own initiative. Pulled out is through advertising and marketing and things like that.
Got it. So almost like a glorified class action lawsuit where you're like, were you hurt by this weed? Not weed, but like pesticides and crap like that. Yeah. Okay.
And it's interesting to see if something like that may happen there.
Yeah.
The number of parties that they're pulling together to file suit. I don't profess to be a class action lawyer, but it seems that there may be the ability to actually bring a class action against him as well. I mean, who knows? There may be, maybe down the road, he's filing Chapter 11 reorganizing, to try to get some of these claims to go away. There's a lot of things that could happen in the future when you are just facing the volume of litigation that he is and will be facing. I mean, of course, I imagine in his mind, the criminal aspect is the most daunting right now. We honestly don't know right now. And there may come out an explanation that, oh yeah, that's what he's saying makes more sense. I'm not saying that will be the case.
Yeah.
And listen, there are weird circumstances for what I and you would consider unusual, but maybe it's not once you get the full story and you hear his side. Because all we've heard today is attacks on him. Like his voice hasn't gotten out there and said, well, no, this isn't true. When I say his voice, I mean through his attorney, obviously.
Sure.
You don't want him speaking because that'll lock him down from a testimony perspective.
Right.
But yeah, and maybe I'm not sure what it would be, but maybe it was just these were parties. I didn't even know that. I mean, the ultimate one could be, I didn't even know this shit was going on.
Yeah.
Like that would be the ultimate step away from it. Like I threw parties in my house and some bad people without my knowledge were doing this. Now there are some allegations of his specific involvement. So that makes it more difficult,
and like blackmail footage and things like that for particular people. Okay. Let me ask you this, because you've worked with high profile people, how often does it happen where there's a biased judgment in the name of money and power?
So that I understand it, you mean that the court renders a judgment that's biased?
Yeah. So if Diddy wasn't worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, like have you experienced in your 20 plus years of doing this, have you experienced biased judgments on behalf of like, oh, that's probably because that person was pretty powerful?
To be candid, I've seen it go more the other way when the rich and powerful are able to I don't want to say buy justice, obtain a more favorable outcome in a court of law because they're rich and powerful.
Yep.
But what you have, and that being said, for a lot of my clients, there are occasional nuisance allegations and things like that will pop up. People saying this happened here when that person wasn't even there at that point in time. Just people trying to do something to get a quick dollar. But the unique thing about this case is there is such a volume of adversaries behind it. So you're not dealing with a lone wolf coming out and saying, you did this. You have a small army of people complaining against you. So that's what makes it more difficult. And in that context there, justice is supposed to be blind, but judges are still human beings. Mm-hmm. I personally don't think they really bend a knee to public pressure, but there was a movement a while ago, when people came out who'd been victims of sexual abuse, Harvey Weinstein was sort of like the poster boy for all that.
Yep.
And the fact is that if Puffy did sexually abuse women, men, then yes, he should be punished. But he shouldn't be punished because he's Puffy. So that's the big difference.
Fair point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair point. Okay, so let's play a little game here. Let's say that you were the head of his legal team and you just found out about the initial allegations. What would you have done differently than his team?
What I would do the same as denying the allegations.
Sure.
Providing specificity in the denial was a little, especially specificity as to an entity like Costco that probably did not want its name dragged through the mud as like Diddy's baby oil supplier,
Fair. Okay.
So I would not have thrown that in. Yes, I would. See, we're dealing with as far as the social consciousness right now, we're dealing with very general allegations. So the response, in my opinion, to very general allegations, obviously ideal would be recanting, meaning you get some of the people who are alleged to say this stuff against you coming out and saying, no, that's not true. That would be ideal. Rare, but ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Absent that, you would obviously want to do a heck of a lot of research on the people who are raising these allegations against you as well. Their credibility matters. Again, because we're at the general stage, though, my advice would be to just generally deny the allegations, and that we are confident that after this is all said and done, our client will be exonerated because it's general right now. There is a lot of work you're doing in the background to try to make this go away. And the other thing that's sort of interesting, and it goes back to your point about, we were talking about Epstein and who's perhaps the top of the pyramid. But if he's not the top of the pyramid, is he giving up that name? And is that something as your attorney, you're wanting to find out everything as his attorney, obviously.
Sure.
And if there's someone higher up, then, and honestly, there are consequences to flipping on people. Or if there are people down below who, like you said, there were allegations of blackmail and things like this. And the FBI raided his 2 houses, I believe, maybe 3 of them, New York, California, Miami. I believe they grabbed video footage, but who knows if that's where he kept all of it. I mean, I'd be seeing if there's information I can trade in on my client's behalf to get a better result. But as far as social perception, just very general denial, fiery, almost like a Baptist preacher's kind of conviction of the propriety of my calls of action and my client. Yeah, and private investigators running everywhere.
Yeah.
There is a lot of legwork you need to do in this case because listen, there's probably going to be some spots on some of the people who showed up at these parties, like Freak Fest, I believe, or something of that nature. You don't show up to something like that as the Virgin Mary necessarily. And I'm not saying they're bad people, and some of them may, but it's you need to investigate everyone who's coming up against you and find out what their story is, what they're doing. And
so what's interesting about you saying that, you say you don't show up to a party like that with pure intentions, but a lot of people would say that parties like this and large rings like this come from, hey, you need approval of these big time people to move up.
Yeah, no. And that is a fair commentary. It's a sad one that people are required to compromise themselves.
Do you think that if he was convicted, it would potentially change that narrative moving forward, where the elites who are potentially doing this would then be like, oh, shoot, okay, yeah, we're not going to get ourselves in that much trouble? Or would they just be like, yeah, it's fine, we'll just sacrifice Diddy and keep moving on?
They're going to keep moving. Weinstein, Cosby, Epstein, hasn't stopped yet.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop ever. The rich, there is a certain segment of the very wealthy who have very unique and normal life bores them. So they do, and how far their level of weird goes varies upon the individual. Yeah. But the uber wealthy, can have very unique tastes. And that's never going to change.
I think that's a fair point, man. I think that's a fair point. Okay, so as we close out this episode, you being an attorney that deals with high profile, business owners, you do a ton of work in this space. How can this case be applicable to a business owner who's listening to this, who's like, okay, I need to make sure I'm protecting myself. I don't have any sinister plans, but how can you offer some application from what's happened to him and what these other guys need to be aware of?
Business owners, entertainers, anyone who is relying upon an NDA needs to specifically tailor it to the circumstances. If anyone tells you I have one NDA that covers everything, that should make you nervous because contracts are based upon facts. And one circumstance is a different set of facts than another circumstance. So if you have one for interactions at your home, if you have one for interactions at a club, if wherever the different circumstances, you need to contemplate those circumstances in drafting the agreement. Don't draft them so broadly that they eat themselves. You want to keep it, you want it to be tailored to the result you're trying to get. Candidly, if the behavior is legal, but it's of somewhat of a more prurient nature, contain language in the agreement disclosing the understandings of the parties as to what is going. Actually, strike that for any circumstance. Contain language in the agreement that disclose the parties know what is going on here. So if you're in a business contract, if you're involved in researching an additive to a product from a particular inventor, put in the NDA, this is what we're doing. For a Freak Fest party or a white party, say, this is a consensual, this is a party with adults, there will be sex, consent is required. If, just, I'm not off the cuff going to detail it all, but it could be detailed in such a way so that people know. But certainly in business, it's easy. Like, you want to detail why this NDA is necessary, not just the general one you get is we're entering into a business venture together, so we just want our secrets to be safe. No, this is what we're doing. So and it also helps when, from an evidentiary perspective, when you're trying to argue what's whose, well, the inventor, obviously all the information regarding the product is his, like it actually helps line up your case. And that really is the ounce of prevention better than a pound of cure. It's so important that in drafting your documents, even something as throwaway to some people as an NDA, that you have it tailored in such, you should not draft a document with the intention that, this deal is going to work out. You should draft a document with the intention of, I am going to go to court and this document is going to prove I'm right if something goes wrong. That's how you should draft your contracts. If you don't do it like that, you get diddied. So you really don't want to do that, unfortunately.
No, that makes sense, man. Gavin, this has been fascinating, man. Diving into this P. Diddy case with you is fun because you have insight that all of these people who are putting up all of this information, we don't know whether it's real and whether it's not. And the fact that we can talk to someone who understands the legal system, who has worked with high-profile cases and understands this on a deeper level, I think is really, really helpful. And I think this is also a great reminder that no matter how big you are, you cannot afford to overlook these little legal details. And so,
Absolutely.
Look, for our listeners, whether you are running a small business, leading a major company, you're an entertainer, fail to prepare to fail. And so at the end of the day, I look forward to, continuing this conversation with you, Gavin. And thanks, man. We'll do it again.
Sounds great, Chris. Take care, man. Thank you.
All right.